Welcome one and all, it's time for yet another Warhammer the Old World Battle Report, this time Warriors of Chaos versus Warriors of Chaos, double dragons on both sides. This is going to be high drama, and not just high drama in the figurative sense, also the models are quite high, quite tall these dragons. So, let's dive in. It's 2,000 points, and look at that. 2 dragons apiece, and we're playing Close Quarter from the square-based seasonal pack. And the way this one works, you have the little bit of a gap on the side of the deployment zone that you're not allowed in there. And this is the terrain layout we ended up with after we eliminated the others in the traditional square-based manner. Ended up with hills in the middle and woods out on the flanks. And the additional scoring in this one, strategic locations 2, so we each have one on the edge of our deployment zone that we can score at the end of each turn. And then we've also got domination in play, so table quarters at the end of the game, divided up, see who gets some bonus points. Now then, let's dive into the lists immediately. In fact, let's have a look at the chat. We've got Alex in there, who is actually my opponent for the game, so may well drop some chaotic tactical nuggets in there as well from the opposing perspective. And we've got Thomas in there as well. Good evening. So, let's start with my list, shall we? Let's go and find the Chaos Dragon. So, we have got the Chaos Dragon is an exalted champion. So, the way Chaos Dragons work now, with the 500 point cap on characters, you have the tough choice. You can either take the exalted champion, who can get a triple save, or you can take the Chaos Lord, who can no longer get a triple save because it's too expensive. But you can get, obviously, the extra toughness and extra wounds and leadership, and you get a close order bonus because it puts you up to 10 wounds as well if you take the Chaos Lord. So you do get a lot of benefits for the Lord, but you can't have a triple save. So it's a bit of a trade-off. Well, you could just take both in the list, I suppose. But I've gone for the Exalted Champion in this one, and the Champion is armed with a shield, a Chaos Dragon, Mark of Nurgle, obviously, halberd, 2 Favours of the Gods, a Brazen Collar for a bit of anti-magic, and the Crown of Everlasting Conquest for the regeneration. Then, if we go back over here, you can see the other dragon, which is a Warp Fire Dragon. And I've not taken any upgrades on it, but you can. Armando says 1.5k. This is 2,000 points, by the way. So we haven't got a lot on the table for that point level because we've got some expensive models out there. Just exactly 2,000 points. And I think my list was maybe like 2 points under, possibly. So the other character I've got is in the Warriors unit there. A bit out of focus at the moment, but there is actually a Sorcerer in there. It's just an Exalted Sorcerer. Level 2 with Demonology, Mark of Tzeentch, no other upgrades at all. So the Chaos Warriors are Mark of Tzeentch as well, so he'll get the spellcasting bonus while inside that unit as long as they're appropriately sized. The Warriors also have an interesting choice that I've gone for. The obvious ones, first of all, the Brazen Collar, which is just nice for that magic resistance, and full command, but then I've also gone for the Razor Standard, so they gain Armor Bane 2. And that's one of the things about the regular Chaos Warriors. They do have the AP 1, but they're not super killy. They're not bad, but you don't get too many attacks with them. So I thought, why not try making them a bit killier with some Armor Bane as well, especially if they're going to be facing any big monsters that maybe they would be wounding on 6s anyway, so you want to look for those 6s regardless, so that would just give them the extra AP on top. So I thought that would be good. Then, the other core unit, oh by the way, there's 21 of those Chaos Warriors. Other core unit is 5 Chaos Knights with the Mark of Undivided. They have Lances, Brazen Collar again, and full command. Nothing else fancy on them. We've got 3 Dragon Ogres, no Shartak, just heavy armor, great weapons. And what's this over here? We've got a Chariot, and that is actually an Aspiring Champion Battle Standard Bearer with no upgrades at all, apart from being Undivided and being a BSB and being on a Chariot. So no fancy weapon, no armor. I just didn't have the points to give him anything else, because he was really squeezing in there. And a lot of people don't bother taking a BSB in the old world. I'm a big fan of them though, so we'll see if that helps out in this game. You don't like your units to just have one bad dice roll and run away, so I like to have the BSB when possible. It's not always feasible with certain armies, with the price you have to pay for them. Like this one on a chariot is 205 points, and that's the absolute bare minimum. You can't really make them any cheaper. Then onto my opponent's list, which has some similarities and some notable differences as well. So let's find the big fellas first of all. We've got a Chaos Lord on Dragon with a halberd, Mark of Nurgle, and one Favour of the Gods. So very similar loadout to mine, other than the fact you can't take the regeneration. So this Chaos Lord and my champion on Dragon are roughly the same points. There's only like 5 points between them, so you would expect that to be an even encounter if they come up against each other. It depends though on whether the eyes of the gods fall kindly upon either of them, that can potentially buff up their stats before they get into combat with each other. Because if my champion were to gain certain stats that the Lord has over me, then that would give me a distinct advantage then, because there's no way the Lord is going to be able to gain the extra save from the Eye of the Gods, for example. So it depends how that falls. Then we've got a Sorcerer Lord who is in this unit here. There's the little Sorcerer. Mark of Tzeentch, level 3. Grimoire of Ogvold, Favour of the Gods, Rod of the Damned, Diabolic Splendor, and Demonology. So the same spell lore as me. And the special items on this one, so one of them is a bound spell of the summoning, so potentially 2 goes at casting the summoning each turn, and also is able to use any of the spells from the spell lore, but can only cast up to the number of them per wizard level each turn. So level 3 would be able to cast 3 of those spells per turn. Then we've got, where are they? 14 Forsaken. Now, Forsaken are a pretty interesting unit because they get a huge amount of attacks, potentially. These ones have been given the Mark of Khorne, or Forsaken by Khorne. It's not really the mark. They're less unmarked, really. They're Forsaken by Khorne. So they're going to have Frenzy, so they're going to be even better at attacking. But because they're a multi-attack model, the second rank doesn't get a huge amount of benefit, because they're only attacking with 1 each. So I have seen people running them in just 1 rank, so you're maximising those attacks that you're getting in. But that does make the unit a bit squishier as well. So, for example, 2 separate units here. If you had this many Forsaken but put them in 2 units of 7, you would get more punch out of them, but that also means that their unit strength is so low that you then can't interact with objectives and that kind of thing. So I was actually looking at getting some Forsaken, a very small unit, before they changed the rules for objective scoring and infantry and all that. So, interesting unit. Then we've got a Warpfire Dragon, and this Warpfire Dragon is actually more expensive than mine because it's been given level 1 with Battle Magic, and it's going to be taking the signature spell, which is Hammerhand. So really it's just increasing the combat output of an already quite fighty dragon. And last time I played against this dragon with my dwarves, it did 2 or 3 wounds to itself over the course of the game trying to use its stone thrower, so I don't expect it to be doing much shooting in this game after that traumatic experience. We have got 14 Chaos Warriors with shields, Mark of Tzeentch, to give the casting bonus to the wizard, and they also have full command. Anything else on them? Icon of Darkness, which isn't going to affect this game because it's just going to make them harder to shoot at. And then there's also a Chaos Chariot with the Mark of Nurgle. And then finally we've got 10 Marauders with great weapons, light armour, Mark of Khorne. So while there's 10 of them, they're going to be able to hold objectives, and as soon as they lose one they can't. But they are inexpensive. Let's have a look. That whole unit is 112 points. So is that the cheapest unit in the whole game? It could well be. It's cheaper than the Chaos Chariot. So let's go and look at the spells. These are the ones I've ended up with. So I rolled, and then I kept Demonic Vessel, because that's a nice buff for the unit that the sorcerer is going to be in, so +1 to strength and attacks. And the summoning is just a nice magic missile, so I got rid of, I think, Vortex of Chaos was the other one I rolled, so I cashed that in for the summoning instead, because that's just a good magic missile. I think Demonic Vessel's casting value has come down to 9, so I could do with updating my card at some point as well. And obviously my opponent has access to all of these spells, but, and you can see these have been amended. I need to get little stickers to put on mine. I might put them on the outside of the plastic sleeves though, so I don't ruin the actual cards. And then of course Hammerhand on the Warpfire Dragon. So let's go back to the wide shot here and talk about the deployment strategy. So you can see we've both put a big core unit next to the objective so we can start scoring immediately as soon as the game starts. My opponent has more core units than I do, but it's not a huge deal on this one with only the 2 places to score. I've got my Warpfire and the Knights out on the flank, hoping to threaten anything that wants to storm through the middle. And you got to be careful with the Warpfire Dragon because you shut off ward saves from units, including your own if you're too close, or models should I say. It's not specifically units, it's models. And out on this side we've got both the enemy dragons quite close together. I've got my champion on dragon there with the BSB for company and the big Chaos Warrior blob, who can start walking forward and still remain within 6 inches of this. So if I do want to advance, they'll do it quite slowly so they can stay on this as long as possible. Dragon Ogres are there because no one really wants to charge them. They don't have a champion for you to challenge out, so I don't think anyone would be too eager to fight them. I think even a dragon is probably a little bit concerned, because I think even if a dragon does quite well with its attacks, you're not going to kill 2 of them probably before they hit you. So you're going to have to face the attacks from 2 Dragon Ogres, which is quite scary. And the Marauders, I imagine, are going to hide behind this hill, was my assumption, because they don't just want to get charged by a Warpfire Dragon because they just get eaten. Or even charged by Chaos Knights. I might be hesitant to charge the Knights in there though, because if I don't roll very well, they've only got 1 attack each, these Knights. I might only kill like 4 of them, and then suddenly I'm facing 6 great weapon attacks coming back at the Knights. So I'm actually wary of that unit because of the great weapons. We've got Mr. Black in the chat. Good evening. Watching from South Africa, apparently. And what do we think about this chariot? Not too concerned about that. I don't think any of my units would be too worried, apart from the Chaos Knights. They don't want to be charged by a chariot. Okay, so let's see. My champion and the BSB are going to really hang out together, so if I get them double charging something, I can accept a challenge if I don't want to get challenged out with the BSB. If it's something I do want to challenge, then the champion on dragon can take it. I choose to give away first turn. The reasoning is because domination is in effect, so if you're going last, you're going to have the opportunity to redistribute your units at the end of the game, and your opponent doesn't have time to react to it. So you can maximise there. Eye of the Gods. The enemy sorcerer gains +1 weapon skill forever. And the Chaos Lord on Dragon gets +1 initiative just for the turn though. And there's a bit of an advance on. This is a hill here, by the way. We've just taken the top off it for now because this unit was perched on it. The Forsaken. The Chaos Warriors are staying back because they want to stay on that objective, I think, and they don't want to get into a fight particularly. Warpfire Dragon and a Chariot. I wouldn't want to be charged by both of them into the Dragon Ogres because there's going to be some impact hits there. So the Chariot and the Dragon Ogres are the same speed, so they should be able to avoid the charge by each other if they want to. Over on this side, I've been given a choice now because Steed of Shadows was cast upon the Forsaken, so they have now blasted their way across the table and right in front of my face. So I've got the choice: do I triple charge Forsaken, knowing that they'll get lots of attacks, and whatever happens afterwards then, I would be hit by the Warpfire and the Chaos Lord at the same time in whatever I throw in there? Or do I ignore that unit entirely? So, look at that cinematic shot with a human hand grabbing a can of Coke in the background. So, what I'm actually going to do here, I was tempted to try and charge with all 3. But if the Chaos Warriors fail their charge and I'm stuck with just the champion and the BSB in there, I don't really like the sound of that. I'm sure I would kill some of them, but they would have quite a lot of attacks coming back at me, and then I'm pinned with 2 dragons looking into the flanks. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to pick a fight with the enemy Chaos Lord, charge my dragon and my BSB into it. So the BSB is going in there to add to the combat res, and then I'll challenge with my champion. So I'm getting my triple save against all of the dragon's attacks. And we'll see how that goes. I think if we say that these two are basically equal, the Chaos Lord and my champion, because they're about the same price, I've got triple save, the Chaos Lord's got slightly better stats, then I think the +1 on the combat res from the BSB could swing it in my favour if we assume they're equal. So that's what my plan is. I'm going to go straight into the dragon with both of these, and then I'm not going to charge the Forsaken because I don't want to give them an extra turn of fighting. Instead I'm going to stay here and throw out some magic missile action. Okay, we score 30 points each for the objectives that we started on, and into my turn 1. So the Knights and the Warpfire Dragon move up. If we look at where they were, they move up to about here. So they're staying out of the charge range of the chariot and just positioning themselves in the flank, ready to strike at any enemies that move forward. My Sorcerer becomes stupid with the Eye of the Gods. I didn't give him any rerolls, I don't believe. So, oh well. The Summoning does at least a wound to the enemy chariot. And blasting into combat with the enemy Chaos Dragon. This picture was taken before the combat was resolved, so I gained +1 initiative on my Chaos Champion, which isn't going to make a difference because I charged anyway. And the chariot steamed in there as well, and it's a BSB, so I also gained +1 weapon skill, but that's going to be irrelevant because I'm going to challenge instead my dragon. I end up winning combat and pushing the enemy dragon back. So the enemy Chaos Lord failed a lot of saves, took quite a few wounds from the chariot's impact hits as well. And the fact that you can do that before challenges is quite a big deal now. You can get those wounds in and then challenge with something else. So you can see I only suffered 1 combat res, which is a result of the enemy being close order. I actually made all my saves, and the enemy did not, so I ended up winning by a lot, but fall back in good order. I follow up. 4 wounds remaining on the Chaos Lord. So that's going quite well, and then I decide this is the moment I'm going to get my thumbnail shot, so I took a few pictures of the 2 dragons right at each other, and because of the postures of the 2 dragons, they actually fit next to each other, which is incredibly rare for 2 gargantuan beasts like that. 4 wounds remaining. Okay, so what's going to happen now? The enemy Warpfire Dragon has to decide whether it wants to fly into combat with something. The Forsaken have to decide as well. Mr. Black says Dragon can't get close order. So the Chaos Lord on Dragon has enough wounds to get the close order bonus, but my champion does not because he's got 1 less wound. So the Chaos Lord on Dragon can actually get the close order bonus. Most dragons don't have enough wounds to get it. Is it only the Chaos one that has 10 wounds? If there's another dragon out there that can get a close order bonus, let me know in the chat if you can think of one. So, we keep scoring steadily again. And into the enemy turn 2, the enemy Lord gets +1 weapon skill, which isn't a huge deal because he's already got better weapon skill than me anyway. And cast Demonic Vigor onto the Forsaken. And then throws in some charges. So the Forsaken and the Warpfire Dragon into my Chaos Warriors pass the terror check, but they both make it in. So this is going to be an interesting combat here. The enemy chariot repositions a little bit to stay away from the Dragon Ogres and to look in this direction. The Warpfire Dragon can still see it. It wasn't able to move sufficiently to escape the gaze of the Warpfire Dragon. And you can see in combat I win again, but not by as much, and I have lost a wound this time. I only win 3-2 this round. So I think I just did 2 wounds there. But I think I'm going to win this combat, or win in general in that fight as time goes on. And I'm going to pause to take a sip of a drink here. Okay, a nice large sip. Now, where were we? So you can see all these Chaos Warriors are getting killed in combat by the Forsaken. I do actually make some pretty good armor saves though, so don't lose too many. And then I believe I just gave ground after combat. I did lose, but as you can see, it's only by 1. Took 6 casualties. And the only other bonus is from the Forsaken close order or open order? I don't remember. But they didn't win by much anyway. Okay, going into my turn, what do we think is going to happen now? The Dragon Ogres, unfortunately, I didn't turn them last turn, so I can't see the Warpfire Dragon, so I can't join in, so I'm going to have to spend this turn turning round. And the Warpfire is definitely going to try and charge that chariot, because you can see those Marauders are poking around the side of the hill now. And interesting quirk of my new phone, you can see picture gets blurrier on that side and nicely in focused on this side. Very interesting. I haven't finished tinkering with it yet. So steadily scoring again. Into my turn. So this time the Chaos Lord goes down. So we've killed the Chaos Lord. Massive chunk, 500 points, plus the general bonus. So that's a big score there. And from this picture you can actually see the little bit of clear plastic that I've wedged under the leg of my Chaos Dragon. Because this is an old lead model, this joint here, this like backwards knee joint thing, or it's more of an ankle I suppose, this one here, is the one weak spot that's holding all the weight, so it just bends at that spot there and starts drooping over to the left as time goes on. So I've wedged that in there, so it's not firmly attached, it's not pinned in there or stuck in there or anything, it's just wedged in there, and that stops the droop. So I might come up with something more permanent, but I think that's fairly seamless for the time being. And then after combat, I managed to restrain and just spin round into an interesting position for the next round, ready to do some damage. Oh no, my sorcerer has been killed by the Warpfire Dragon. My Chaos Warriors, though, do a really good job this round, because you can see I cast Demonic Vigor. And that meant that with that extra strength and extra attacks that my warriors had, I killed quite a lot of Forsaken. I killed half the unit, so 7 of them. And we had a really interesting situation here with the Warpfire Dragon, because the Warpfire was shutting down the ward saves of units, of models within 3 inches. But that wasn't all of the Forsaken. It was only the ones at this end. So that's a really odd quirk, and I don't know 100% if there's a way you're supposed to play that, but the way we did it is that if you start removing casualties from this end, then you would get a ward save, so you just roll them one at a time until you reach someone that doesn't get a ward save, and then you just take models off. And then you start taking from the front rank, and then suddenly they get a ward save again. Is that correct? Is there anything in an FAQ that I've missed that covers that? Because that's a really bizarre situation there. Because often there'll be buffs that affect units within range, but this debuff specifically affects models within range rather than units, so it's very odd. But I did win the combat, and the Warpfire and the Forsaken fell back in good order, but weirdly, because the Forsaken didn't go as far, I ended up crashing into them with the pursuit move, and the Warpfire was then able to just reform and face whichever way it wants. So the Warpfire, because I charged it and defeated it, is now able, or because we were still in combat and I defeated it, because I won, it's now able to just go off and attack wherever it wants. So that's another very interesting part of the rules there. If the Warpfire hadn't fallen back as far as the Forsaken, then I would have crashed into that first, and they would have been able to spin round afterwards. So very interesting. So the Warpfire is now in a position to charge some units. You can also see that in my turn here, the Knights and the Warpfire Dragon tried to charge this chariot, which fled. Now, here's another interesting quirk. It passed the terror check, so it didn't have to flee from the Warpfire Dragon, at which point it flees from the unit with the highest unit strength, which is the Knights, when it elected to flee. If it had failed the test, it would have fled from the Warpfire Dragon, but because it passed the test but chose to flee, it flees from the Knights because they are high unit strength. I think that is correct. But it just slightly altered the direction of flight. And you can see that neither unit caught up. And if the Warpfire Dragon had rolled one more inch, it would have crashed into these Chaos Warriors, which would have been very interesting. However, because the way the Knights have landed here, and with the Warpfire now being able to attack me, suddenly they're looking a bit vulnerable, so I'm thinking maybe they shouldn't have bothered going in. Though I think the Warpfire Dragon should have just gone in on its own. My plan was to go in, kill the chariot, and then overrun into the Chaos Warriors with both units. But obviously it fled, and I didn't make the charge. Still scoring because we've both got units next to the objectives of sufficient size. And into the enemy turn, we've got the Warpfire into the flank of the Knights as expected. The Chaos Warriors have moved up a bit so they can do a bit of magic missiling into the Dragon Ogres, and they've done a wound there, you can see, with the summoning. The Marauders are heading this way. They do actually have to declare a charge into my Warpfire Dragon because they were just within range, but they didn't roll high enough. And the enemy chariot does rally. My Knights get killed. Well, I think three or four of them got killed, and then I think it was just one left that fled and got caught and died. So the enemy Warpfire is now right behind mine, but it is my turn next, so I'm going to be able to fly away. So the Knights are dead. In combat this round, I defeat the Forsaken again. And the Forsaken have a lot more attacks, but the Chaos Warriors have the superior armour, of course. And numbers. So for this turn, the enemy have moved too far away from the objective, so I've taken the lead slightly on objective scoring here. And if we go back, so we're about roughly halfway into the game. If we look at the state of play for the domination as well, the Marauders are in this area unopposed. Well, they will be in a minute because my Warpfire is about to leave this area. Down here looks like it's going to be mine because I've got these two units and I've got the Warriors and the Dragon Ogres. The top there we've got an enemy chariot which is about to get charged, so maybe I could kill that. And really a cheap unit like Marauders that maybe aren't going to contribute too much to the game from this point because the only units they're threatening are much faster than them, so could get away. Then maybe their best bet is going to be to hang out in one of the domination areas now. Just to get those points at the end of the game. So my Warpfire Dragon charges into the enemy chariot, does a lot of damage but leaves it on just one wound. And by a lot of damage I mean probably 2 wounds. I think it made some ward saves to just survive there. Then my Dragon and the Dragon Ogres both flank charged the Forsaken and just wiped out the unit between them and the Chaos Warriors. And unfortunately the Dragon Ogres did not pass their test to restrain, so they had to just go straight forward and crash into the Chaos Warriors instead of turning to face the enemy Chaos Warriors. They could hit me in the flank now. However, I don't think they will because they don't want to get hit by my dragon. It would undoubtedly devour them. It would probably eat the champion first, then eat the sorcerer, then finish off the unit. And the enemy don't really have anything as backup over there. If we look at what's left, I've only lost the Chaos Knights and a Wizard. My opponent has lost the General, Chaos Dragon, and a whole unit of Forsaken, so I'm definitely up on kills at the moment. And I'm taking the lead further with the objectives as well. On to round 4, so second half of the game, we have, because my Warpfire didn't kill the enemy chariot, we now have Warpfire versus Warpfire, but with a rear charge. And the enemy Chaos Warriors decide they're going to use Steed of Shadows and just get the hell out of there instead. Why charge Dragon Ogres and ultimately get killed by things when you could just run away? And I think that's wise. The enemy Warpfire Dragon. Well, first of all, I put my attacks into the chariot to finish it off, and I do kill it. The enemy Warpfire does a couple of wounds to me. My Warpfire Dragon fails its leadership, flees, and is murdered by the enemy Warpfire Dragon. And something felt off about it. Like, it feels like a Warpfire Dragon should have some special rules so that it doesn't just die. Like, I don't know whether it should be... I don't think it's got, like, immune to psychology or anything. But it feels like such a big monster should have some ability so it doesn't just run away and die at the first sign of trouble. Obviously, the enemy Warpfire is exactly the same as mine. One thing that I definitely forgot to do is Actually, if you get run down, do you still get your explosive demise? Which is where, when the Warpfire Dragon loses its last wound, before it's removed, every unit within 6 inches suffers d6 strength 5 hits with AP -2. Is it considered losing its last wound if it's caught while fleeing? Interesting one. There's probably a ruling on that somewhere. Okay, you can see the enemy marauders have moved on to the objective now, so they can keep scoring again. And the enemy army is now entirely there. Those 3 units, and this is my entire army here, these 4 units. So in terms of domination, I've got the slight edge because I've got 1 additional unit at the moment. But this is the dead pile over there, so it's just this lot that's alive. No charges for me in my turn, so all I do is reposition, get my dragon chasing after these Chaos Warriors, and my most vulnerable and expensive unit is this unit of Chaos Warriors here. If the Warpfire charged into them, it could do some pretty serious damage. I can't challenge it out with the champion, so it would probably kill a good few of them, maybe win combat, and I don't want to risk that with an expensive core unit. So let me see how many points my Chaos Warrior block is. It is 414 points, so I don't want to be giving away the points for them. So not much action in my turn. In the enemy turn, Steed of Shadows successfully cast again onto the warriors, so they run away yet again. And not much else is going to happen. The Warpfire gets into a position where it is going to fight. Regardless of what I do, I don't think I can get everyone out of its charge arc, so it's going to have the option to attack something. And the Marauders just move out of my Chariot's BSB's charge range. And turn 5 for me. So my dragon continues to chase down the Chaos Warriors. Dragon Ogres and Warriors just look at each other in case the Warpfire charges one of them, and the BSB gets out of its charge arc and out of range of the Marauder skirmishers. I don't want my BSB to get killed. So it's mostly just repositioning these last couple of turns, and I'm also thinking about domination now as well. So after the next turn we'll have a wide shot and I'll show you what my plan is from then on. So the enemy gets Steed of Shadows off again. If they fail to cast it once, I think they would be forced to stay and fight. But they have successfully done it all 3 times and managed to fly off behind these woods, so I can't charge them anymore. So the best I can hope for is drop a template breath weapon attack with the dragon on them and see if I can make them run off the table. The Warpfire Dragon decides to go after my Dragon Ogres, which is risky, but also a potential good chunk of points there. And would I have been more tempted to go for the Warriors? Maybe. I think maybe the Warriors could have been easier to kill. The Dragon Ogres have got 12 wounds there on a 3-up save, so it's the same save as the Warriors because they'd have parry. And how many Warriors are left? Let's see, the same number. So you've got 12 wounds. Actually, the Dragon Ogres have got 1 less wound because they'd already lost 1. So the Dragon Ogres are down to 11 wounds. But with every wound you do, that's 1 less warrior to hit you. And they hit much less hard than the Dragon Ogres as well. So it's a tough one. Maybe thinking the Dragon Ogres were slightly easier to kill. And also you don't want to get flanked by them, maybe. You can see my Dragon Ogres do lose combat, but they only fall back. They do not flee. I think I did a wound or 2 to the Warpfire, took a few wounds, lost 1 Dragon Ogre. They're definitely my favourite models. Possibly my favourite models of all time, these 90s Dragon Ogres. Then, into... Okay, so, if we look at... We've got a bit of a wide shot here. Domination. These Marauders, I don't think I can throw anything in there that's going to equal their unit strength. There's 10 in there. So, and also the Chaos Warriors moved into that section as well, so I'm just going to ignore this one entirely. 2 enemy units in the same section. I'm just going to let them have it. Everyone else is going to spread out. I believe my opponent actually forgot that domination existed, but I don't know whether there was a huge amount that could have been done differently. Maybe the Chaos Warriors could have flown down into the bottom left instead, so he's actually contesting 2 areas instead of 1. Because they're kind of pressed into 1 section now. So my Chaos Warriors want to stay in this section, the BSB wants to stay in this section, and the Dragon Ogres want to stay in this section, maybe, or my Dragon can be in this section as well, and also drop a flame template onto the Warriors, which are just off screen over there. So I'm just going to try and maximise how many points I'm getting from domination. So, my turn 6. Well, I charge in the Dragon Ogres. Well, the Dragon Ogres, I think, were already in combat, weren't they? Because they were locked together. But I charge in the Chaos Warriors into the flank of the Warp Fire, and win in combat, and I've got a Dragon Ogre left on 1 wound. The Warp Fire Dragon flees on its final wound, and I chase it but do not catch it. So I do get a lot of points, though, because it's down to below 25% wounds, and it's also fleeing at the end of the game. And the app that my opponent was using, it didn't seem to have an option for both of those things, so I need to look at the rules again and see whether that's something that stacks, whether fleeing and also being reduced below 25% can both score you points. My dragon stayed in this section of the table here for domination purposes, and then used a breath attack to kill a few Chaos Warriors, but not enough to force a panic check, unfortunately, which would have been them straight off the table if they'd failed. And that's the end of the game. So the Marauders have this table section, BSB has that one, Chaos Warriors have that one, my dragon has this one, the Warp Fire is fleeing so it doesn't count anyway, and that means that I get 600 domination points, my opponent gets 200. So we add that to the kill points, we add that to the objective points, which I was building up at a steadier rate until the end of the game when my warriors moved a little bit away from it and my opponent caught up a teensy bit, but I still had the edge on those points. Kill points, I had the enemy general, I had the Forsaken, I had the chariot, lots of points for the Warp Fire Dragon fleeing and being heavily wounded. My opponent got my Warp Fire Dragon, my wizard, and my knights. And that's it, because the Dragon Ogres are still kicking, and they're not reduced to below 25% models because there's only 3 of them and 1 of them is still alive. And with all those added together, the difference between the two scores was roughly 900 points, just over 900 points, I think. So we think it probably would have been a 14-6 in a tournament setting, which I am pretty happy with. A couple of things didn't go too smoothly. The Chaos Knights got themselves killed, maybe foolishly, because they shouldn't have been attempting such a long charge against a unit that was likely to flee from them, and that left them kind of out in the open. We had the unfortunate incident of the enemy Warpfire Dragon falling back further than the Forsaken, so that it wasn't locked in combat anymore and could then just turn around and charge me elsewhere immediately afterwards. The Dragon versus Dragon, I felt like my Dragon had the slight edge because of the triple save, and also having the BSB hanging out with it as well for the combat res was nice. And BSB on a chariot, was it worth... How many points did I pay for that? Did I say 205 points? Is it worth that for a BSB? I'm not sure. It might be better to have a BSB on foot. How much would that be if we want to take him off the chariot? Let me just check here. So, a chariot is... Chaos Chariot, 110 points. Yeah, so you're like doubling the cost of the unit with using a Chaos Chariot. You can put them on a Demonic Mount, a Chaos Steed, or a Gore Beast Chariot. Gore Beast is actually even more expensive. So, I'm not sure. Chariots, though, it did a good job. The impact hits and then the extra combat res against the enemy dragon definitely helped. You can't necessarily guarantee that you'll have a chariot that keeps up with your dragon, though, because it is slower. It doesn't have swift stride, so there's no guarantee they'll both make the charge unless the enemy lands very close to you. So on that basis, I'm still undecided on the BSB. What do we think? Let me know in the comments whether you would consider having the BSB, whether you'd put him on something different. I like the idea of the Chaos Chariot, though. Those impact hits definitely came in handy. And also it looks cool. I do like that Chaos Chariot. We've got Wraith in the chats. Good evening. You might be a bit late. Mr. Black says, I think the BSB is good sport. I agree, he's just a bit pricey, because he's actually more expensive than another unit of 5 Knights or a unit of 3 Dragon Ogres. And I don't know whether him being on a chariot is worth one of those units. So you can see why people don't always take them. The cheaper Sorcerer I quite liked, actually. I didn't have as much spellcasting power at my disposal. Also, my opponent having Hammer Hand on the Warp Fire Dragon, even though I don't think it did too much in this game, because most of my units had magic resistance, so it's only against the Dragon Ogres that it actually got the spell off, I think, once, and didn't do that much. But I do like that, actually. It's only 30 points, I think, to become Wizard level 1, and you can guarantee you can get that spell if you take Battle Magic, because it's a signature spell. So that does give it a bit more combat punch for only 30 points, so I think that might be a good idea that I might steal, actually, and try that. So it puts the Warpfire Dragon up to 405 points. And where would I shave off points? Well, I don't even need to, really, because at 2,000 point events, with the square-based comp system, the Warriors of Chaos currently get 2,200 points, so I would have extra points to spend on top of this at 2,000 point events. The next one I'm going to is 2,600 points, though, which was set up and announced before the comp came in, so I don't think that's going to be in effect. And I am planning to use the Warriors of Chaos at that event, which is why I wanted to get a game in with them now. I'm currently painting some more Chaos Knights, which are even older than the ones that I already use. They're all metal from the 80s, and I've put modern shields on them, though. Partly because I just didn't have any older shields, and also because they'll match the shields of my other knights, so they kind of look like they belong to the same army. And I'm also painting a few more regular Chaos Warriors, but not the single pose warrior from the 90s, not even Hero Quest Chaos Warriors, of which I have some as well. They're actually the Chaos Warriors from Battle Masters, which are aesthetically very similar. The only difference is that they have shields and they have halberds. And what I want to do is just sprinkle a few of those in there, especially a couple in the front rank, just so it's apparent that my unit is armed with shields, rather than telling everyone that their giant yellow glove is actually a shield. I can actually have some shields visible for my opponent. And it also keeps the single pose nature of my plastic Chaos Warriors going. It'll just be 3 different single pose models in there. So the GW one, the Hero Quest one, and the Battle Masters one. Thomas says, would just a regular chariot be better then? Well, maybe. But I do like having the BSB. The problem is, if you put it on a chariot, you're not necessarily getting the best out of it, because it's not going to be as close to the rest of your troops always. So that's something to consider as well, whether it might be worth taking just a chariot separately, and then also having a BSB, and putting it in a unit and maybe giving it some kind of magic banner to make the unit even fightier or more survivable. Mr. Black says, what about Gigantic Spawn? Well, the issue with Gigantic Spawn is that I don't have any models to represent it yet. With my cut-off of 1998, the models for my army, that rules out the official Gigantic Spawn, which I believe was like 2006. So what I want to find is the metal mid to late 90s Great Unclean one. The one with the really long tongue and holding the sword up in the air. I would like to find one of those and use that as a Gigantic Spawn. The problem is they're very expensive, especially a complete one. So every now and then I'll scour eBay and various other places to see if any have popped up. But until then I might be without a Gigantic Spawn. That's what I'm waiting for. Other options for the army. I do have one of the classic metal bloodthirsters, which I would like to use as a demon prince at some point. I don't know how good demon princes actually are though. They're not super expensive compared to a dragon, but they also, their stats aren't super great. They don't have a lot of attacks, and they're unstable as well, so if they lose combat they start just disappearing. I don't think they have any stomps. Let's have a look. No, they don't have stomp. They're not terrible. If you want to make them... Let's see, how much is it if you want to make a demon prince fly? Let me have a look here. So they're 215 points to start with. And if you want to give them wings, it's an extra 30 points. That's actually pretty reasonable to fly. Fly 9. So 245 points for a flying demon prince with no further upgrades. So if you start upgrading them, you can turn them into wizards, give them marks, give them loads of different magic items, 100 points worth, then chaos gifts as well. You can make a really expensive demon prince, but they're not as survivable as a dragon, which is an issue. And with their lack of wounds compared to a dragon, 4 wounds rather than 9 wounds for the champion on a dragon, so less than half the wounds, and they're also toughness 5 just like the champion on dragon. So half the survivability, but you're going to be paying way more than half the points once you've started upgrading them. So they just don't seem like that good value when you look at how few wounds they have. 1 lucky cannon shot can take 1 out. Alex says every Demon Prince I've played just went poof to combat res. Yeah, that's very possible as well. You have to be super careful with them. So I think Demon Princes do need to be better. I'm not a big fan of their rules. They are very cool though. And if you're making one into a wizard, that's maybe... It's very expensive though, when you could just put a wizard on a chariot or something else. And you'd probably have more wounds if you put a wizard on some kind of monster. Or a demonic mount, something like that. That would be able to go in a unit as well, possibly. Thomas is looking forward to seeing new additions to the army. Mr. Black says, I play dwarves now, previously ogres. The princes normally last 1 turn unless they use Armour of Destiny. Yes, if I'm playing dwarves and I see a demon prince, I'm pretty happy, because I think I'm going to be able to shoot it down quite handily. And then if it does charge in, dwarf units have usually got some pretty good combat res anyway, so I wouldn't be too concerned by a demon prince. The lack of stomps as well. If they gave them... Let's have a look. If they kept all their stats the same, but they gave them... How many stomps would you want? A Dragon Ogre has 2. Why doesn't a Demon Prince have any? Demon Prince is bigger than a Dragon Ogre. They should have at least, like, Stomp D3 at a minimum. D3 plus 1 Stomps for Demon Prince. That would make them more appealing in a fight, because they've only got 5 attacks. And Toughness 6 would be great as well. If you put the Demon Prince up to Toughness 6... Alex says Demon Plate is good on paper too, bumps him up to 6. Yeah, so you can get him up to Toughness 6 if you take that upgrade. But he's getting very expensive then. For still not a lot of wounds. So I'm not sold. You can definitely make one and put it in a list, and it probably won't be horrible, but it's just not as good as the very strong other big flyers that we've got. The Warpfire Dragon has more wounds. It is faster, I think. It has a shooting attack. You can also make that a wizard, and it's in rare, so it doesn't use up your character slots, character point allowance. Because there's not too much we want to take in rare. There's the Gigantic Spawn and the Warpfire Dragon are the main ones. We don't really want to be taking Hell Cannons because they're terrible, maybe the worst cannon in the whole game. So yes, once I've added these new Chaos Knights, suddenly I'll feel like I actually have a Warriors of Chaos army that can compete at the higher point levels without like overloading characters to obscene degrees. Like the reason that my Sorcerer has always been so expensive is because I just didn't have the models, so I was making up the points by making the Sorcerer very expensive. I like the lower level Sorcerer with Zinc, so you still get the probability that some of your spells are going to go off. So I'll probably stick with that, but keep tweaking everything else. And I think it's about time to be wrapping this one up. So let me know what your thoughts are on the Warriors of Chaos, on Dragon versus Dragon action, whether you like the Chaos Lord with the improved stats, or whether you like the Champion, whether you like the Exalted Champion, which is the one that you can put on a dragon, with its ability to take the triple save with the slightly reduced stats. And also let me know what you think of Chaos Warriors in general right now. The square-based comp's given them an extra 200 points, so it obviously feels that they're slightly underpowered at the moment, but not as much as many of the armies out there, and still do good stuff with them. The regular Chaos Warriors have got a bit of a buff from the infantry bonuses that came in, and Chaos Knights I still think are good. I didn't use them very well in this game, but I think they are a good unit. Good for supporting dragons because they do have a champion in there that can accept unwanted challenges, and they're fast enough with Swift Stride to maybe keep up with the dragon as well. So maybe that's their role that they should have rather than the BSB on Chariot, who's actually more expensive than them. And yeah, not sure about Mr. Chariot. Might try and work a BSB in elsewhere. Okay, thanks for tuning in everyone. Don't forget to check out all the links in the video description, all the various social media shenanigans. There's Facebook group, Discord server, which, if I say it's popping off, that might be a lie, but there's definitely some comments in there. And you can keep up with what's going on in there. There's also Twitter on Blue Sky as well, all that good stuff. And obviously, if you want to pay a significant portion of your life savings for me to attend more tournaments, which are quite expensive, so I can keep reporting on them and giving you all the tactical insight and the tactics of how to turn up to a tournament with Warriors of Chaos, having never used them in a game of Warhammer Old World before, and win all 5 games and win the tournaments. That's the kind of knowledge you get on this channel. And why not pledge your entire life savings on the Patreon or PayPal links down in the description as well? Because I'm sure you were only going to fritter it away on something rubbish anyway, like orcs or a Bretonnian Pegasus Knight. So why not just send me to more tournaments instead? I think that's much better use of it. Okay. All that remains to be said at this point is good night out there, whatever you are.